This is Lesson 1064, World War II from 1939 to 1942. And the essential question is simple. What were the major events during this time from 1939 to 1942? World War II was a two-theater war with fighting taking place in Europe and in the Pacific. The Allies and Axis powers converted to total war for the second time in 20 years. When World War II began, Germany used a lightning war strategy called Blitzkrieg that relied on fast, strong attacks using air raids, artillery, and tanks. Here they are rolling through St. Petersburg. By 1940, Germany had conquered Poland, Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. Here they are rolling through Paris, and in the background of the picture on the left, you can see the Eiffel Tower as Hitler and his cronies are taking a tour of the newly conquered city. And you can see this person crying at the same time as being forced to salute Hitler. When France fell to the Nazis, Britain was the only nation still at war with Germany. In 1940, Germany began a massive bombing campaign using its Luftwaffe, which means Air Force. The British Royal Air Force defended Britain from attacks in what would be called the Battle of Britain. The British Royal Air Force fought German planes aided by radar and the ability to crack German codes. Prime Minister Winston Churchill vowed that the British would never surrender. And you can see some damage being done to London right here in this photograph. And these are people hiding from German bombs down in the subways of London. After 8 months of stubborn British defiance, Hitler gave up, called off the air attacks on Britain, and focused his attention on Eastern Europe instead. The United States vowed to remain neutral when World War II began. After the fall of France and after the Battle of Britain, the U.S. began selling war supplies to the Allied powers. In 1940, Italian and German troops moved to take control of North Africa, and meanwhile Hitler took control of the Balkans. In 1941, Hitler broke the non-aggression pact that he had made with Stalin, and he invaded the Soviet Union. Here's a good cartoon of what Hitler did. As Hitler is stabbing Stalin in the back, he's saying, "Forgive me, Conrad, but it seemed such a good opportunity." And you can see Stalin in shock, dropping the non-aggression pact. By 1942, the Axis powers controlled most of Europe and North Africa, but were unable to defeat Britain or the USSR. Meanwhile, the Japanese were expanding throughout the Pacific. From 1939 to 1941, Japan conquered European colonies in Asia, including French Indochina. Japan threatened to take the U.S. colonies of Guam and the Philippines. Critical thinking decision number 4. How should the United States respond to what Japan is doing? The decision actually made was decision C. In 1941, the United States cut off sales of iron and oil to the Japanese. The Japanese interpreted this embargo as interfering with their right to expand. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. The surprise attack crippled the U.S. Navy and killed 2,300 Americans. After the attack, the USA declared war on the Axis powers and entered World War II. And you can see some very emotional propaganda posters here encouraging Americans not to forget that Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. After Pearl Harbor, the Japanese took the Philippines and threatened to take India and Australia. By 1942, Japan controlled a large empire in the Pacific, declaring Asia for Asiatics. but what they really meant was Asia for Japan. From 1939 to 1942, the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan, dominated Europe, North Africa, and Asia. But 1942 would be a turning point year for the Allies, who were able to turn the war around and win it by 1945.